Well, hello there. I didn't see you come in. Make yourself at home. Have a drink. While I give some attention to some underappreciated characters and storylines that I personally love. And I hope you grow to love as well. Hey there, everybody. Before we get into the issue, I just wanted to let you guys know that this is the free version of the podcast. And all that means is that this is far behind where I'm at in the Patreon version. So if you're liking this and you need more John Constantine, you can't get enough, be sure to go over to patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, and sign up for the Hellblazer tier, which gives you access to the entire Hellblazer library that I've done so far, and a new Hellblazer podcast every week. And you'll also get the exclusives from our main Planes, Trains, and Comic Books podcast. So if any of that interests you, definitely check out our Patreon at patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books, all one word. And with that, let's get into the issue. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Matt's Minis Hellblazer. Today, we are reading Hellblazer number 15, and just a little catch up on the last issue. A new story arc has started where Constantine is on the run from the police because the demon Nergal in previous story arcs killed his entire, or I guess everybody that lived in his flat, like all his neighbors and everybody, and then he arranged their bodies in satanic looking ways. So now the police think that Constantine is a suspect and that he's some kind of crazy Satanist who killed his neighbors. So Constantine's been on the run, and he has met up with some people while he was hitchhiking that are travelers. I guess they're people that go around in caravans and like live off the grid, basically. They're kind of like counterculture people. They do psychedelics and stuff, and they talk about magic and pagan rituals and stuff like that. So he's hanging out with them because they seem pretty nice and pretty cool, and they're kind of like, you know, like chill hippies, basically. So but first things first, we got the cover here. We see a ghostly figure that looks a lot like John, and it's all scratchy and stuff, just like all the other covers have been, kind of cool and multimedia art and esoteric looking. But that body is getting struck by lightning, and we also see that the issue is written by Jamie Delano. The art is by Richard Piers Rayner and Mark Buckingham. And we start on the first page where we left off last time, pretty much, where Constantine has been living with these people, and he, of course, sleeps in a tent while they all have vans and motorhomes that they all live out of. But he doesn't have one of those yet. So he's hanging out in his tent, and he wakes up, and, of course, he's like, oh, my God, I got to piss so bad. He's like, this is the best alarm clock ever, is just having to take a piss in the morning. So he gets up, and he walks to, like, a creek that's nearby to kind of wash up. And we see the name of this issue is called The Fear Machine Part 2. So this is a whole arc named The Fear Machine, and I believe it's 12 parts. So we're in for a good long story here. And while he's kind of bending down to wash his face in the water, a woman walks up kind of close to him, but not directly in front of him, so she doesn't see him. And she's kind of in her underwear and stuff, so she's another traveler, but she's wanting to take a bath, basically. So she starts to undress, and Constantine is like, should I say something or do anything? He's kind of debating, because he does say that she's pretty, and he's seen her like look at him and stuff while they're like around the fires at night. So he's like, oh, I should not be creepy, and I should definitely like announce my presence. So as she's about to pull off her shirt, he's like, oh, hey, I'm here. I'm sorry. You just didn't see me, and I was here before you. And so then we find out that the long stairs across the fire were not because she liked him. It's because she actually read the newspaper that said that he was a satanic murderer. And so she's very, very wary of him and scared of him. And she's like, don't come any closer. And he's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I know who you are. I saw what you did. You killed them, didn't you? And he's like, no, like the newspaper had it all wrong. But that like freaks him out enough that he's like, I can't let her ruin what I've got going on here. So he does some magic and tries to put the whammy on her. He looks her in the eyes, and he like commands her to stop and says, look at my fingers. And he proceeds to do a spell that's going to like make her forget that she read the newspaper. So he says, my name is John. I'm kind to children and dumb animals. The newspaper is a hole in your mind. Now start counting. And when you see me next time, it's for the first time today. So she begins counting, and then all of a sudden she turns around and is like, what? How long have you been there? And then she starts to get sick, like nauseous. And she's just like, what's going on? Did you do something to me? And she basically can tell like he did something to her head. And this really pisses her off, obviously. He's like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. I shouldn't have done anything. I'm losing my touch. So it's like, I guess that's something he could do before pretty easily on someone because he was more practiced. But now he hasn't really done it for a while. And it didn't work. So she knows that he messed with her mind, and he feels super bad now because he's like, you know what, that was totally wrong of me, and you know what, that's not like me invading her mind without, you know, her consent or whatever was basically like rape, a type of rape at least. And I got to respect people more than that. So he kind of goes on a walk to clear his head a bit and kind of think about what he did. And as he's walking, Mercury runs up and is like, hey, John, do you want some company? And they decide to go on a walk together. So as they're walking, Mercury asks John if he knows why Mira, who's the woman that he tried to brainwash or whatever, why she's in a bad mood. And he's like, oh, I don't know. And Mercury's like, well, she had a bunch of mushrooms last night. I'm sure that was it. She was just having a bad morning. But Mercury does say that Mira said that John had done something to her head, and that's why she was mad. And then she tells John that she does it sometimes too, because she apparently has a little bit of magic in her, and she can like push stuff like that onto people. Like she says, it's all right, I won't tell. I do it sometimes too when I want to play with the other kids without them being nervous of me. So she makes them feel calm so that they're okay playing with her. So they continue to walk, and they come to an area that's got a fence around it, and it's got like barbed wire fence. It says a company's name named Geotronic on it. It says keep out and everything. And Mercury's pretty angry when she sees this. It's surrounding a bunch of stones, and the stones are arranged in a certain way, kind of like Stonehenge. They're also big like that, where they're standing up straight, even though they're long. And she gets angry because she's telling him that these are special stones that are along a ley line. Now, if you don't know what ley lines are, they kind of give a breakdown in this, but basically the earth has these like lines of power running through it, like electromagnetic centers or vortexes or whatever. And these stones are kind of in line because the people of old knew about these powerful areas in the earth. And so they put these stones like Stonehenge and whatnot to kind of channel those energies. And so apparently Mercury can feel those, and she was like following them, and she's mad because she can tell that the people who are fencing off these stones are not doing it like, I guess, to protect the heritage or whatever. They're doing it to figure out how to use that energy for themselves. So she jumps over the fence and runs inside, and a security guard starts chasing her, and he grabs her because she's not listening to him. And, he's like, what are you, deaf or stupid? And he starts really manhandling her. And Constantine kind of flips out. He grabs a stick and he's like, let go of that girl. And in his mind, he's saying, well, I've started it now. I'm going to have to finish it. So he actually puts the stick up like he's going to hit the guy. But he actually swings and hits the stone next to the guard on purpose just to kind of scare him. And then all of a sudden, a couple people come out and they look like they're in charge or at least part of the company. And they're like, Davis, what's going on? Oh, and I forgot to mention that when John was telling the guard to lay off, he was trying to say oh, it's my daughter. She's just curious about the stones or whatever. So they tell Constantine, hey, get your daughter out of here and leave. And then the whole time they're talking, John notices, he says, it's weird. Mercury and that pasty-faced bloke can't take their eyes off each other. And then as they're leaving, Mercury is kind of looking sick or not feeling good. And it turns out she was mind wrestling, basically, like scanners or something, with the company man that came out. I think it might have been the guard, but they didn't really say specifically who it was. So John asks her, hey, are you okay? What was going on with you and that guy? And she says, it's all right. Don't worry, John. I'll be okay now. It was just that place and that man walking about in my mind. Why are there always bad people in the world? And John just kind of wait, what? He was walking around in your mind? And then Mercury basically tells him, I don't want to talk about it. Let's just get home before it rains. And he's like, yeah, good idea. We should get you back to your mother. Now, last issue, I thought Marge was her sister because they look pretty young in the drawings, but Marge is actually her mom. So I got that wrong. Sorry about that. But anyway, so they get home and, they're like, oh, how are you doing? And we see that Myra, the lady that he met in the morning, is off to the side, looking at him, arms crossed, very angry. And as Constantine walks up, he kind of says, oh, don't let me interrupt your ceremony. And they're like, oh, no, we haven't really taken off yet because they're about to drink some mushroom tea. And then Constantine turns and sees Mira standing there kind of looking at him harshly. And he's like, hey, I'm sorry about what happened this morning. I want to apologize. I didn't mean to upset you. And she seems very fine with it. She's like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Here, have some of this tea I made. So I don't know why, because I totally would have been suspicious after hearing that they're going to drink mushroom tea. that if someone poured me tea in this group, I would be like, you're totally giving me psychedelic tea, right? But he doesn't think that. He's like, oh, thanks. You know, I guess because it's England, people drink tea a lot. So he like downs that whole cup of tea and then is like, well, thank you. And he walks away and she's got a big old smile on her face because she knows what she did. And he's like, oh, I'm going to go over to Errol and say hi to him because he's pretty nice. And if you don't remember, Errol is the mixed race fellow that was like super nice to him in the last issue and told him he could use his shower if he needed. So he's been really nice to Constantine. So John goes over there and starts talking to him and sees that Errol is painting. And what he's painting is, I guess, the history of, all the adventures that this caravan has been having. So he's like, oh, yeah, this is when we got arrested by the cops. This is when we went to Stonehenge. This is where we did this. This is where we did that. And the pictures are kind of simple, but they look like cave paintings kind of thing. So John's actually like, wow, that's pretty cool. And as he's looking at it, he's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And like all of a sudden he starts tripping out. He's like, the tea hits him and he goes batshit crazy as far as in his mind. He's seeing all these crazy colors. The world is topsy-turvy. He's seeing like weird shapes and everything. All of a sudden it starts raining and the rain is different colors and everybody's like, what's going on? Is he freaking out? What's happening? And Myra's like, I gave him some tea. And they're like, oh, is it just mushrooms? And then she's like, no, I gave him this stuff called fly agaric. And Eddie, who's the friend of Mira, that's kind of like the leader of this band of travelers, he's like, what the heck? Mira, you need practice to handle that sort of shit. So she just dosed Constantine with something that he is not ready for. And Eddie's like, John, buddy, how you feeling? And John's like, I feel like a bomb. And then he narrates, it's what the Vikings took to turn them into blood-crazed psychopaths, berserkers. And so he's like really tripping out. And he's like, I got to get out of here. So he just starts running away and they're like, you shouldn't be on your own. And he's like, I can't handle it. I'm fine. And so he runs out into the woods like on his own and he just has a giant trip. This trip lasts a couple pages. He starts seeing animals that aren't there. He's like feeling the earth and the world and he's seeing like writing it's like some mystical writing in front of his face that's not even like a language that he knows. And he's freaking out basically. And when he kind of starts to come to, it's night. And also he's like laying against one of these stones that's out in the pasture. That's one of the ley line stones. And so he kind of wakes up and he's like, okay, it's finally starting to wear off. Like that was crazy. And then he turns because he hears a noise and he sees there's some like scientist guy who's attaching probes to his head that are attached to a machine that's also attached to one of these ley line stones. And so the guy turns it on and all of a sudden the world goes topsy-turvy again and Constantine's like, oh, it's coming on again. And he has to like grab the stone because it feels like the earth literally turns sideways and he feels like he's falling. And he's like seeing all these crazy visions. He's seeing Swamp Thing in these visions that are like looking at him and this guy as like the world is turned upside down. And the whole time Constantine's high, he's saying like, he's talking about fear and how much fear he's having inside of himself and how that's like taking over his mindset and whatnot. So this trip is kind of revealing that to him that like he needs to embrace the fear, curl up with it, numbing our minds, crying our way into oblivion, mud filling our mouths. And while this is going on, while he's narrating that, he is seeing crazy shit, rocks eating people and... This dude that he's watching, this scientist, begins smashing his face into one of the rocks repeatedly. And I mean, like, he's smashing his skull. And then Constantine passes out again, thinking it was all a dream or whatever. And he wakes up much later, it says. And he goes over to the rock that he saw the scientist at earlier, and he does see blood all over it. And he narrates, I'm cold and wet. My head feels like a demolition derby, but at least the world's regained its mundane form. And then he yells out, psychedelics. And then he narrates further, still, I survived. There were some pretty wild visuals. And that guy who nutted the stone, he didn't seem like a hallucination. No sign of him, though. And like that's when he sees the blood on it. And he's like, what the hell? So he begins to go back to the camp slowly as he walks over there. And we also see as he's walking, there's someone else in the woods kind of following Constantine and has a walkie-talkie and he says, Shepherd Default, come in. So he's reporting to someone that's watching Constantine or at least these travelers. So as Constantine gets back, he goes to the van that Marge and Mercury live in. And she says, that she was super worried for him and she's glad he's back. But he's like super cold because he's all wet because it rained and he's shivering and he can't really talk correctly. So she's like, oh, let me warm you up. And she takes off his clothes and like puts him in a blanket. And they're kind of snuggling up, for body warmth. And they get under the covers together. And they're just talking kind of about little stuff like, how's Mercury? And, he thinks her dad is like an Olympic runner or something because she can run so fast. So Marge is like, no, he was just like a drug dealer or whatever. Like he wasn't anything special. And as they kind of get more comfortable under the covers, it's pretty obvious that they have a attraction to each other. So they make some loving. And when they're done, they're both like very like, oh, that felt like it was the right thing to do. I guess maybe they've had some feelings for each other that have been building up over the month that he's been here. And as they're kind of like just snuggling afterwards, Mercury like pops out of nowhere and is like, hey, what are you guys doing? And just kind of joins in the conversation that they were having. And then as they continue the conversation, we kind of zoom out of the camp and we see Constantine's narrating. He says, this place is having a strange effect on me. There's something important here, something valuable, something I should care about. And then we hear Mercury say, hey, John, when we were at those stones earlier, I really liked it when you said that you were my dad. And then he's like, Christ, she knows how to hit the spot. Families, huh? Families are supposed to be love and strength and comfort. But more often, they're just heartbreak and jealousy. Oh, well, sleep now, worry later. And then as he's thinking that, we see there are some people sneaking up and it's the police. They have followed maybe Constantine or they just are on the trail of these travelers and they're about to get booted out or something worse. So that'll be on the next issue of Hellblazer. And if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planes, trains, and comic books, all one word, at gmail.com. And we'll see you on the next one.